an iPod, a phone. Are you getting it? These are not 3 separate devices. This is one device. And we are calling it iPhone. Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone.
Hey guys, welcome to day 4. Now, the video that you just saw sparked a significant change in the world, one that defines the generation of focus today, Gen Z. Now, I'm sure you haven't been sleeping through our past few videos, but just in case your mind is filled with all the information in schoolwork and other classes you're balancing, here's a quick recap. So this entire spring, we are talking about different worldviews. In other words, different ways that people view, understand, and interpret the world around us. Now, there are some really obvious worldview differences. Think about how a Muslim views the world around them compared to a Buddhist. Big worldview differences there. In fact, if you ask the both of them to together lead a middle school field trip to the Creation Museum, there's a big chance that they are going to disagree about pretty much everything. Now, that being said, our world is also filled with some smaller worldview differences. Think about the difference in culture. For example, I'm not a big fan of super spicy hot sauce. Why? Because they make my tongue feel like it's balancing an atomic bomb. Now take my friend, a missionary to South America for many decades. He can't seem to get enough of them. The way that we view hot sauce is different. There is a difference in a very small way in worldview. Now aside from culture, the biggest worldview clash that we deal with on a daily basis is generational. In fact, the reason why many churches split is not because of doctrinal issues. It is not because of Christian issues. It often boils down to generational differences. If the Christian worldview is going to continue strongly in the decades to come, we need to learn to ease the worldview tension between generations. Now, keeping all of this in mind, we started the week talking about Generation X. Historians have nicknamed them the doers. Born soon after World War II, they are generally Christian and work incredibly hard. They are the generation, generally speaking, of your grandparents. The next generation we talked about was Gen Y. People have called themselves either millennials or premillennials, depending on their point of view. And they felt cool with their Walkmans, they traveled the world, and they're being used by God right now to lead churches and disciple the younger generation. So after X and Y, naturally there comes Z, right? And today we're talking about Generation Z. Gen Z has been nicknamed digital natives. They are born no later than 1995, and they are wizards at communicating digitally. Their smartphone is an extension of their identity. But not only that, it is a Swiss Army pocket knife of communicating, of taking pictures, listening to music, and feeling connected. In fact, many of you might be watching this video right off of your smartphone, which is just another sign that you are part of that new Gen Z. Speaking of video, a new set of language always follows a new generation. And as Gen Z has new ways of communicating, their lingo has changed too. Let's see it in action in this next video.
Brock, say hello.
Stop.
All right, let's get started.
You guys have the Wi-Fi password?
All right, Brock, we're gonna start with some simple ones.
Yeah.
Okay. Hello, how are you?
Saw.
Friends,
Fam.
family.
Fam jam.
It was a fun event.
The fest was lit.
Okay,
Oh,
I'm about to leave.
I'm finna dipset.
Those are some neat shoes.
Them kicks are dripping.
I would be glad to help.
Bet.
My favorite team lost.
Dudes took an L.
I completely agree with that statement.
Facts.
I agree.
Yeet yeet.
Excuse me.
Yeet.
Wow, that's exciting news.
Yeet.
Congratulations on your baby boy.
Yeet.
What does yeet even mean? Yeet is yeet. That doesn't help. I don't get it. Weird flex, but okay. I don't know.
Well, that was interesting, wasn't it? I love talking up Gen Z. Why? Because God is going to use you in new and exciting ways. But before we talk about how God might work through your generation, what are some of the defining things that make you wired and think the way that you do? Well, first, technology is not just a cool gadget, it's a way of life. It's something that makes the normal possible. Of course, we need to watch the possibility of being addicted to our phones, right? As well as living with our head under the sand. There's a ditch on both sides, and I see teens all over the world doing their very best to walk the tightrope between those two dangers well. Now, I have to be honest, there is very little data about Gen Z. We don't know what the defining moment will be like the moon landing or 9/11 was for previous generations. But that being said, some expect that this coronavirus might be that defining event for your generation in America, for Generation Z. Now, even though we don't know much, one thing is becoming quickly obvious, and that is that we should be a little concerned with the spiritual compass of Generation Z. Gen Z is far less religious than the generations before. Now, though researchers are trying to understand why that is, the leading idea right now is that they simply are pretty distracted. According to Pew Research, a little over 30% of young millennials, a term used to describe the emerging features of Gen Z, see religion as an important part of their life. If we compare this to what we learned about Generation X, we see that's a drop in almost 10%. That's a staggering cliff that religious America is walking off of, and we'll see the effects of that in the decades to come. Now, that being said, one thing is very interesting. As we look at the data, we see that more than ever before, young people have questions. Take this one, for example. Pew Research asked people if they ever felt amazed at the universe around them, or filled with questions. In that category, there is actually a strong increase among young millennials. Even though Gen Z has more access to information than ever before, God has still programmed their minds with the deep worldview questions we talked about last week. Your peers in your generation want answers about the world around them, and you are being equipped to answer them. How cool is that? Hey, as we wrap up this week, understanding the different generational differences in worldview better, I'd love for you just to wrestle with this question. What can you do to impact the world around you for the sake of Jesus? In other words, what gifts and abilities has God given to your generation that you could put into practice to see the largest amount of people ever come to a saving faith in Jesus? As your generation continues to figure that out, I'm excited to see how God is going to use you in new and in exciting ways.